Hello and welcome to Taking Hugh for Granted, the podcast in which two Hugh Grant enthusiasts watch every single film starring Hugh Grant in the attempt to answer the simple question, is this film taking Hugh for granted? Is this film good on its own or does it rely on the bumbling Brit for its acclaim? I'm Diggory Waite and I'm joined as always by my colleague and fellow Hugh Grant obsessive Oscar Beardmore Grey. Oscar, how the bloody hell are you doing today, mate?
I'm very good, Diggs. Very excited to review this latest Hugh Grant work. It's who would have thought that we would end up with Hugh playing a serial character?
It's a serial character. We've seen him play. Have we seen him play serial killers? I don't want to give away too much about films that people might not have seen, but we've seen. But this, he is a serial mascot. He is Tony the Tiger, and spoiler alert, he's great.
Damn it! I wanted to get that in before you.
But you know what's so funny about this film as well? It's called Unfrosted. It's on Netflix if you guys haven't seen it. But it's all to do with Pop Tarts. Now, Oscar, what have we got with us today?
Well, we both have our own Pop Tarts, and they look quite similar, actually.
They do.
What flavour is yours?
I went for strawberry because that's the sort of classic, isn't it? Yes, you've got the same. I think that's the strawberry kind of classic. My box is slightly different. I've left it in the kitchen because I put mine in the toaster, and I also put it in the toaster for 3 strength or number 3 because that's what in the film the woman's like 3. That's how I like it. And I think I've slightly burnt one as a result.
Yeah, yours look a little too frosted there.
Yeah, exactly. Not good.
I mean, have you ever had a Pop Tart?
You know what? I have. My brother used to love Pop Tarts. So, which is so strange because it's such a foreign snack. And in fact, I was watching an interview with Hugh Grant where he said, I don't think that they even exist in Britain. And I was thinking to myself, you're very wrong there. What about you? Have you ever had them?
I have never had a Pop Tart. So I'm intrigued to see what this is all about. I feel like I'm like you. I didn't even realize that these existed outside the US. So, I mean, is this a breakfast food? Do people actually eat this for breakfast?
That's a good point. Well, explain what are we looking at here? Because some people will only be listening to the audio and they might not even fucking know what a Pop Tart is.
Yeah, I mean, so we've got a kind of, I guess you would call it, it's like a sort of pastry, but very fake, rectangle shape with a bit of like icing on it, and I assume there's a strawberry inside.
Yeah, I think so.
It looks more like something you would have for a snack at like 4 p.m. rather than something you would eat for breakfast. But, there's all kinds of horrible breakfast cereals these days. So I guess, whatever the kids want, as we find out in the film, of course.
Exactly. Well, shall we see if it's what the kids want? Should we take a little bite?
Let's have a bite.
Hopefully, if people who hate this, they will hear us now hate this. It's the ASMR.
I hate the fact that people are going to be able to watch me eating on YouTube.
I love it. Oh, you know what? That's all right. With a cup of tea, that'd go great. Now I sort of get the breakfasty vibe. It's quite stodgy. That's why I want something. Mm-hmm. This isn't. You know what? This is terrible for radio because now I'm just going to hear our voices and be like, "Clear your throat, lads." There's something horrible in there.
Yeah, it's all right actually.
Shit.
I mean, what's in it? Let's have a look at what's in this thing. Sugars. Well, there's a lot of things that don't look like real things or sound like real things. There's dried pears, dried apples.
Wow.
Then there's something called Yellow Sunset FCF, Brilliant Blue FCFs, Titanium Dioxide.
Mate.
There's a few weird things in this thing.
Oh God. Have you read this book that's doing the rounds at the moment? I can't remember what it's called, but it's all about ultra processed food. Everyone's reading it. Honestly, one of my mates is so into it and he will be seeing that we're eating this and pulling his hair out.
Do you follow that guy on Instagram? What's his name? Eddie something. He just goes around to supermarkets and he's like, "Kids, stop eating this shit."
I'm surprised he's still got away with that, and Big Breakfast hasn't killed him off yet. Because this film is biographical, which I believe it is, then he should have been offed by now. But speaking of this film, We've had our Pop Tarts. What would you before we get into our synopsis from Synopsis Simon? And because people still might have no clue what we're talking about, what do you think of the Pop Tart? What are you rating it? Is it taking you for granted?
I was about to ask you that same question. I don't think this is taking you for granted. I actually think this is better than I thought it would be. I would give it like a solid 7 out of 10.
Yeah, mate, I completely agree because I was like, I had a bite and I thought that's all I'd have, and I had another one, and I was like, how many more bites can I get away with before we have to continue the podcast? And it's actually becomes rude that I'm just sat here eating 2 of them.
Yeah. How much did yours cost, by the way?
Oh, do you know what? I can't even remember. It was part of a big food shop, but maybe I'll be able to find out. How much did yours cost?
Mine was $5.79. So. That's about £3 probably.
I reckon mine was almost certainly the same. Which, when you think about it, I got 8 little guys in there.
Yeah.
Don't know how.
So you have your breakfast is that's 4 breakfasts for £3 or $5. You can see why they've been flying up. They were flying off the shelves.
Yeah, I was really lucky to get this strawberry one, can I just say. I think clearly, this film has made a seismic difference in the number of Pop-Tarts going in the Camden Sainsbury's. Everyone like me diving at the chance. Anyway, wonderful. I completely agree. This is not taking you for granted. I hate that this podcast has become a Pop-Tart advert. But that's what films are these days. Barbie, advert. Pop-Tart, Unfrosted, advert. Oppenheimer advert. I'm sure nuke purchases have gone up. Anyway, right, come on. Let's have a synopsis from Synopsis Simon.
Unfrosted, directed by Jerry Seinfeld and released in 2024. Kellogg's Bob Cabana, played by Jerry Seinfeld, assembles a crack team to engineer a toasted pastry that could change breakfast forever, the Pop Tart. However, it won't be so straightforward. Kellogg's archnemesis Post is racing to develop a rival product first. Milkmen from Big Milk are threatening repercussions should Kellogg stray too far from cereal, and a potential coup is developing inside Kellogg's among disgruntled cereal mascots like Snap, Crackle and Pop, and their leader, Tony the Tiger, played by Hugh Grant.
Wonderful stuff there from Synopsis Simon. So let's talk about that man, Hugh Grant, a.k.a. Thurl Ravenscroft. Oscar, what did you think of Hugh Grant in this film?
Well, Diggs, you got it in earlier, so I'm just going to have to say it. I thought he was great.
We can't have enough of those. We can't have enough. We just keep doing them.
I thought this role actually suited Hugh perfectly. And I mean, maybe we should start off by talking about his look for those who haven't seen it.
Of course.
Hugh is playing Tony the Tiger. I mean, Tony the Tiger is one of those characters who kind of transcends generations, I feel like. Everyone knows who Tony the Tiger is. But he probably is most famous in kind of like our parents' generation, I would say. And of course, there was that terrible, I guess, advert in the early 2000s where there was a poor boy who kind of got bullied to the point of, did he commit suicide? Or like, it was very bad.
At the very least, that was the rumor. Yeah. And that I have heard people have debunked that since, and other people said, no, it was true. But like Tony the Tiger, you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. Tony Tiger is so massive that he then, like you say, for a while for us, he was entwined with this bad story. So yeah, he's a big deal. He's been around.
Yeah, I mean, like people bullied this kid for saying it's great
on an advert, which he was paid to do.
And Hugh is like probably the first person since to kind of bring back Tony the Tiger, bring back the character. But I thought he was very funny. I think he was actually, I guess I am spoiling it now, but was one of the standout characters in the film. His look, it's kind of funny because this is a Netflix production, it's a proper Hollywood film, and he is essentially wearing like a Halloween costume.
Yeah, for so much of it. Yeah, he's walking around in this huge tiger costume.
Yeah. Well, I know what I'm going for is Halloween next year.
Oh, yes. That's such a good idea. That's so good. And also, because then when you obviously take the helmet off, he has this amazing sort of pencil moustache And he's constantly, I feel like he's constantly wearing eyeliner as well, because his character, he's this disgruntled theatre actor who, you know, wants to be doing Shakespeare, wants to be doing this stuff, but has just landed this role as Tony the Tiger. And have you actually looked up what he looks like in real life? This is based on the actual guy, and he looks pretty similar.
He does look very similar. And, you know, Thor Ravenscroft, who is the name of the character, and the real life Tony the Tiger, very much mimics the person that Hugh is trying to play. I mean, and the funny thing is that, you know, as we've seen over the last few years, that Hugh is playing a series of washed up narcissistic characters. I mean, I think he said in an interview, he said, you know, he basically, the older he gets, the more he loves playing angry little men. And then he was asked like why he loved the character, and he said he just loved his shocking vanity and narcissism, and then just started laughing, which I just thought was, you know, he was basically just like, yeah, that's me.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I completely agree, and you're so right. I mean, in the interview I saw as well, he listed off some of those angry little men. He said Forge Fitzwilliam, obviously from Honor Among Thieves, the Dungeons & Dragons film, but also no more so than the Oompa Loompa that he just played. That was a very angry little man. But he also said that this character, he saw him as the sort of darker, more twisted cousin of Phoenix Buchanan, who from Paddington 2. And actually, as soon as he said that, I was like, oh shit, yeah, we kind of have seen this before. This wannabe thespian who, you know, is kind of, like you say, washed up. And this guy was darker and more twisted, which perhaps we'll get onto later on. But I do think it's a fascinating role for Hugh. But he did steal every scene. He was so funny.
Yeah, and I don't know for people out there wondering, like, how did he get this part? One of the interesting things I thought, and Jerry Seinfeld did an interview on one of the big New York talk shows, and basically said that Hugh kind of rang him up out of the blue and was like, I want to have a role in your movie. I want to be Tony the Tiger, which I just think is kind of hilarious that, you know, Hugh is like out there, not really like sifting around for serious roles. He's just looking for the roles that are the most wacky and where he can have like the most fun. And he certainly has a lot of fun with this role. I mean, I think his moustache, let's be honest, looks... We've seen moustaches before. We've seen them in Morris. We've seen them in Champagne Charlie, and we know it doesn't really suit him. But we'll give him. I think we'll let him off, given the fact that the real Thor Ravenscroft actually looked like that.
Yeah, you know what? That makes me. You've given me ideas now that we've got to do a rating Hugh Grant's moustaches. Like we do a whole episode on that, because there's probably about 5. If we really go through them all, like you say, Champagne Charlie, Morris, we could probably find 5 bits of facial hair and we could do a proper ranking, but that'd be great. I mean, it's really interesting that you say that about the Jerry Seinfeld thing, because Hugh Grant was saying that's how he does it these days. So Jerry, I don't think even knew that Hugh had the script, but like you say, Hugh got in contact with him and then sent him a video being like, this is how I'm going to do it. And obviously he says that's how he does it now. He, like, you know, even for Guy Ritchie, he was playing around with the idea of when he played Fletcher, would he be Scottish? Would he be Irish? Did he do this, that? And he would like send little videos of how he was going to play it. And he apparently, that's like with the call with Jerry Seinfeld. Firstly, it's to convince the director not to have him in the film. Because as we know, Hugh Grant doesn't want to be doing films and he's scared of them, and he makes loads of reasons why not to do it. But then he's like to show them what he's going to do. So he sent this little video and he says that's their cue to say, bravo, wonderful. You're in. And clearly that's what happened with Jerry.
Yeah, and I thought that this film, we wouldn't see that much of him, because it's been a trend where he's only in it for a couple of scenes, but he's a reoccurring character in this film, and he's in the first scene, which is always great. Yeah. And then we, of course, see him. I don't know, Diggs, if you want to talk a bit about this. He comes back in this final sort of hurrah. I guess the final scene is basically a reenactment of the January the 6th Capitol storming, where Hugh is made to look like that guy Jacob Chansley, who, if you can remember, was the guy who was wearing kind of like horns, had an American flag on his face, and had like a fur coat on.
The QAnon shaman, I believe they call him. Yeah. He's an iconic image from the storming of the Capitol building.
And Hugh is basically playing that, but instead of, you know, the fur and the well, he has the horns, but he's got like a tiger version of that with tiger face paint.
The costume is amazing.
The costume is brilliant, and we get to see Hugh with his kit off again, and for a man in his early 60s, he doesn't look bad.
No, exactly. Yeah, always good. That's going to get people to watch it. Hugh does have his top off in that, and they storm the Kellogg's headquarters to try and break in there. I mean, that's what I would say. People, maybe we'll talk a bit more about the story, but I don't really think the story matters with this film. You've had the synopsis. That's pretty much all you need. But it is interesting that they do have a lot of references to quite dark things in this film, and the storming of the Capitol building, it is quite interesting that they poked fun at that, but they did, and Hugh Grant got the starring role in it, and like you say, was in the film way more so than we thought it'd be. For a Hugh Grant fan, you have to watch this film because he's actually in it so much. He's great,
and he is the person who rallies up the other characters from the various other serials, which I thought was brilliant. Like,
yes,
I think we kind of knew that we were going to get some of these characters from other serials, but you realize how iconic a lot of like serials are growing up, and how much influence I guess Kellogg and Post have had in everyone's lives. Like the Quaker, the Quaker was fucking hilarious.
From the Oats So Simple guy or whatever. Yeah.
And then
Snap, Crackle and Pop.
Snap, Crackle and Pop, who seemed sort of depressed the entire time.
They were
very strange.
So funny. They were sort of like that, like mumblecore, like sort of nervous teenager vibe, where this trio just walking around together. They really, for me, were so funny. I thought they were so bizarre, but they stole every scene they were in. You had the Fruity Loops parrot, I think.
Yeah.
But they were all there.
Yeah, they're all there, and there's this brilliant scene at the end where they're all sort of banging their drums, and then Hugh is standing there with his megaphone. Tony is encouraging them to go and take down the big giant Kellogg. I mean, they don't really end up doing it, but it's still a fun scene.
It was still great, and like I say, I mean that kind of brings us on nicely to something else I wanted to talk about, which is obviously we have this amazing cast of these breakfast cereal giants, these breakfast cereal mascots, but that leads to just an incredible cast in this film. Obviously Hugh Grant at the top of that list, but like every scene they just go to a different place and there's a different incredible actor or comedian on stage, and I think that's what you get when you've got Jerry Seinfeld going, I'm gonna make a movie, it's my directorial debut, who wants to be in it? And I mean, my favorite and most unexpected, it's really hard to say. I can just name a few now and we can go through them, but I think Peter Dinklage as the head of this evil sort of milk corporation, because Big Milk are angry that obviously they're a vital part of breakfast cereal. So the fact that Kellogg's are moving into sort of a breakfast, whatever we've just had, Pop Tart, which means no milk at all, is crazy. So they keep getting threats from them, and eventually Jerry Seinfeld's character is captured and Peter Dinklage is the head of it. He was brilliant.
Of course, we had so many, huge stars, American comedians, and that's probably why Hugh was drawn to it, because he got to, be with all these great actors. And we had people like Amy Schumer, who was kind of had these wonderful outfits. Every single scene, it seemed like she changed into, like a full yellow costume, a full blue dress, a full green dress. And she played a very good villain, being the head of Post. And I don't know, Diggs, I know you have a bunch of people in this film that you thought really sort of brought it to life.
Oh, well, I mean, so I mentioned Peter Dinklage. Obviously, you've got Hank from Breaking Bad. I apologize, I can't remember his name, but him playing Khrushchev, the former leader of the USSR. And this film is set in the height of the Cold War, which perhaps we'll talk about later. But the fact that he's in it anyway, about a film about breakfast cereal, and somehow Khrushchev is in it, but he just garbles stuff that sounds vaguely Russian, and then someone translates it. Like, it's just so funny that would have been his day of filming. Then, of course, you had John Hamm, people who like Mad Men. He plays a marketing guy in this as well, and he's like, oh, we're gonna call Pop Tarts, like, I can't remember, like, Sexios basically, or whatever. And he's tried to make this really like sexy marketing campaign. So that's great fan service for them. But I think my favourite of all, and perhaps the craziest, was fans of Bill Burr, the comedian. Bill Burr plays JFK, and so much of his scene, Jerry Seinfeld was saying, was ad-libbed. But this is kind of coming on to perhaps one of the downsides of this film. I was watching with my girlfriend, and we only got about 20 minutes halfway through, half an hour through, which, to be honest, I think is fair enough when a film goes straight to Netflix. I think you're allowed to watch it in these ways. But she turned to me at one point and went, "Is this a kids' film?" And I had to, it's a really interesting question because it's about a children's cereal product. It's all bright colours and flashy stuff, but most of the cast and almost all of the references are exclusively for people that lived through the 60s, pretty much. And I think also Bill Burr is a great example of that. When he plays JFK, he references JFK's son in it. He talks about the relationship he had with Marilyn Monroe. The Double Mint twins, I had to look up who they were. He sort of references that he's going to...
Bubblegum, right?
Yeah, but they were these really, sexy ladies who were used to sell bubblegum. And he JFK sort of calls them into his office, and then later it's announced that they're pregnant. There's a lot of jokes in there which are very adult, but also very targeted at a certain demographic, which is perhaps where this film slightly loses people. Because I caught a lot of them, but I don't think I caught even half. I would be fascinated to get Synopsis Simon, a man of age and distinction. And, back in his day, he used to go to America all the time. He would know all these commercials. He'd know all these references. And he might love this film more. I don't know. What did you think about? Maybe we're moving into the thoughts on the film. But what did you
Diggs,
think?
I think you're absolutely spot on with that assessment. When I finished watching the film, the first thing I thought was exactly what you thought, which is I don't think I got half the references of this film. And this film is very much targeted, which is fine, to people who are fans of Seinfeld. Or right. That generation and before. I'll admit, this is another problem reviewing this film, is that I have basically never watched Seinfeld. That was a TV show that was huge from the late 80s to the late 90s. So people who are, I guess, probably our parents' generation and maybe a little bit after would have been fans of that show. I think there is. The 60s is a weird time. I feel like people assume that everyone knows a lot about the 60s, but I feel like for people like us, I studied the Cuban Missile Crisis at school. I guess I know who John F. Kennedy is, but most people, I know who Khrushchev is, but there's lots of people who probably be like, who the hell is that? He's a character from ages ago. The guy's been dead for fucking yonks. So, maybe the film is expecting a bit too much of people's knowledge of the 60s, and is targeted at an audience where, I guess it's just people above the age of 60. There are a lot of people above the age of 60 watching Netflix, but for anyone else, you'd be like, I might not watch this, or I don't really understand what all the hype is. Is a serial film. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And you know what? That's a really fascinating point, because I haven't really watched Seinfeld. So the fact that you're saying that, if you're right, and I think you might well be, I'd be interested to see what someone who loves Seinfeld made of this, because this is one of the things I was sort of explaining to people when I'd seen it, is it has this curious thing where almost some scenes will sort of have no point, or they'll go and see someone. It doesn't really go anywhere, but it's because it's a vehicle for a joke. For example, they go and see this guy who's they call him El Sucre, and he's the sugar guy. And so it's a big joke for, he's got loads of sugar. They meet him in the rainforest. He's got an unbuttoned shirt. He's from some Central American or South American country. And the big joke is he's selling them cocaine. Someone upsets him. They pretend to shoot them. It's a scene that sort of, I don't think any of the jokes really hit that hard or land that well. But that's a lot of the film is them going to see people making little jokes that they're just throwing a lot at the wall, and whatever sticks, whatever hits with you hits, and sometimes they fall to the wayside. But I think that's a rather odd packaging for a film, and it makes it kind of come across childish, which and also like it's not funny, even though there are some moments where I was sat there genuinely really laughing. Obviously, they all involved Hugh Grant, but it's an odd one, and sometimes I want to stop myself and be like, Diggs, you're taking it too seriously. It's just a funny movie. In fact, Jerry Seinfeld was saying in one of it in an interview, he was saying there was a point on set where someone was yelling at their assistant, and they were really screaming at them. I had to go over to them and put my hand on their shoulder and go, listen, this is a film about Pop Tarts. No one should be yelling. This doesn't mean anything. And you know what? I love that about this film, and I think I love that about most films. It's pointless, it's funny, it's silly, but it is interesting to look at, because I did sort of look at this film and go, I felt myself being like, I'm not fully in this, and I wish I was.
You know, I sort of want to like almost like apologize to anyone who is a massive Seinfeld fan who's probably tearing their hair out right now, being like, these two idiots don't get it. They don't get like the Jerry Seinfeld's style of comedy, like this very kind of like almost like sketch. It's almost like this
many sketches,
like you say, it's just full of gags. There's almost like a gag every few seconds to the point where like, it doesn't matter if you don't get all of them. But I think it would be better if you were a man or a woman of a certain age, like Synopsis with Simon. So I would be intrigued to hear what he makes of this. But you know, I think like you say, it's just a bit of fun. It's a bit of fun.
Exactly.
People, and you know what? I feel like these kind of films do very bad in like reviews, because people are like, they're looking for something serious to hang their hat on, and it's like there's nothing serious to hang your hat on here. It is Hugh Grant dressed up as a tiger. You know,
what else can you say?
It's taking the piss out of like two massive American companies, like they're like, you know, warring like schoolmates, you know, in the playground.
Yeah, who actually secretly fancy each other, which is actually a plot line in this as well. So that's actually a good point, you know, It's like pulling each other's hair in the playground. It's actually because they love each other.
And I mean, I guess it's about time someone took the piss out of this massive, massive industry that has got away with feeding kids with shit for years.
Yeah, exactly. It does feel like a nice jibe. And in fact, that's what I found really interesting about this film, and I'd be fascinated to look behind the curtain and find out what deal was struck with Kellogg's, and I guess Post, because I think that's their logo that was in it. So it makes me think that, like, unlike Barbie, which was this big, like, well, you know, maybe some people thought I was a bit cynical. I think Kellogg's, it's an odd film where Kellogg's and Post really do take the piss out of themselves as well, and they take the piss out of how much sugar they're feeding to kids, and it's great.
I feel like maybe it's just me, but I'm not sure. I feel like I don't eat cereal anymore, and I feel like cereal is on its way out. Like, people don't like eat cereal maybe in the same quantities that they used to. There's a lot more awareness of how unhealthy some cereals are. So it's interesting that, like, you know, there must have been some kind of legal or partnership, or they would have told them, even though Jerry Seinfeld jokes in an interview about the fact that he's going to be sued by both of them. Like, this probably must
it must have been squared away.
It must
Kellogg's
have been
on everything in this.
Exactly. So it's almost all like all publicity is good publicity to them, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And again, with the success of the Barbie movie, why wouldn't they think that? I'm not sure this is going to be quite up there. We're not going to have Hugh Grant playing Tony the Tiger at next year's Oscars singing it I'm Just Ken equivalent. But we'll see. Don't. That would be so incredible. I'd love that.
Taking he for granted. Taking he for granted. Taking he for granted. What did you think, lads? Were they taking he for granted?
Well, Oscar, Unfrosted 2024, a Netflix original. Are we taking Hugh for granted?
Diggs, I'm just, after speaking for 45 minutes and having eaten our Pop Tart, I'm now getting that kind of sickly, sugary, artificial taste in my mouth from eating this horrible breakfast food. No, I'm doing the Pop Tarts disservice. These things are fucking great.
Yes, we managed to get another one in there.
Diggs, we're not taking Hugh for granted. This is another smash hit from Hugh.
Yes.
Any film where Hugh plays a character that is similar to Phoenix Buchanan, where he's taking the piss out of himself, he's taking the piss out of an industry or something or someone. Yeah. I'm just fully on board, and he does it brilliantly. And I I feel like we are a broken record when it comes to saying Hugh stole the show, but Hugh genuinely did make me laugh most of the time when he was on in the film, and I think he was a credit to the film, and boosts it. He lifts it up rather than bringing it down. So for that reason, we are not taking Hugh for granted.
I absolutely concur. I completely agree. It's funny because people would have heard us now and they would have been like, did they really like the film? But I have to say, something came to mind once. I briefly worked with a guy who had worked for ages on sketch shows, and he was like, the way to do a sketch show is to actually do loads of jokes. So when you were saying this film was a gag a minute, and a lot of those sketches, some of them won't hit with people, because if you do the same sort of comedy over and over and over and over again, then you're gonna make your audience smaller. Whereas if you try lots of different gags, lots of different stuff, you're gonna, over the course of an episode, everyone's going to be happy. And to be honest, I kind of think that's the way with this film. By the time it finished, I was looking back and thinking back to some of the moments where I laughed the loudest, and I thought, you know what? There's a lot of them in there. Taking that onto Hugh's side, Hugh can be proud to be part of a film that has such a striking resemblance to Oppenheimer. It is a crack team of great thinkers assembled. They are racing their rivals. So this is Kellogg's racing their rivals post to come up with this big thing that's going to change the world first. And can I just say, the detonation scene when they're all hiding there, just like in Oppenheimer, behind the protective, like, sandbaggy screen, and they're watching this guy put 2 Pop-Tarts in a toaster, and then, it all blows to smithereens.
That was completely lost on me. That's brilliant.
Oh, yeah, come on, it's Oppenheimer, isn't it? It just feels like Oppenheimer. The whole thing felt so Oppenheimer. And even at the end, Hugh Grant is, in that black and white scene, Hugh Grant's character, much like Phoenix Buchanan, is sent, he's in court, and there's that court scene at the end of the film, and I was thinking, this looks like Robert Downey Jr. in Oppenheimer. This film has it's grandiose. It's got money behind it. The cast is incredible. Yes, there are moments that don't land, and there are moments that don't hit, but Hugh Grant is a credit to this film, and it is really good fun. If you're willing to just sit with it and just wait till the end and not take it too seriously, guys, don't take things too damn serious. Just have a Pop-Tart, sit back and relax.
Yeah, exactly.
Have a nice time.
Grab yourself a Pop-Tart. I'd be interested to know how other people think about these. Like, is it if you were an American? Was this a staple in your household growing up?
Yeah. I was saying to Synopsis Simon, I was like, I've bloody bought these Pop-Tarts for this, and I'm going to have to eat them all now. And at first, I was upset about that. After taking a bite out of it, I can't bloody wait. They better send us some Pop-Tarts or send us some money or something after this. Because honestly, all we've done sat here has gone, yeah, the film was okay. That point's not very funny. But the Pop-Tarts, though, they're delicious.
They pop, man.
They do. They absolutely pop. Come on, everyone, say it with me. They're great. Now,
I just had a thought there. It was like, when you said Pop-Tart, it's like, pop goes your heart. Hugh just loved.
Oh, God.
Great.
Oh, my God, the universe. And he's literally said, we now know that they're cousins, Phoenix Buchanan and Thurl Ravenscross, cousins. Pop goes my tart. There's just so much to think about. Wow. Well, hey, gang, this is a point to subscribe, follow to the podcast, because at some point we will perhaps, like our epic retrospective, we reviewed everything he's ever done. Maybe we will have to actually clear out a wall of your flat and start putting pins in it and linking all the films, creating the universe, and somehow make this podcast where we link all of it together and talk about the Hugh Grant universe. And anyway.
Any way to keep the pod going.
Yeah, exactly. We're desperate at this point. At Taking Hugh on Twitter, at Taking Hugh for Granted on Facebook and Instagram. We've obviously got some Hugh Grant films coming up. There's a scary one. There's a sexy one, Bridget Jones. Any other pieces of business?
Not really. I mean, I think that's going to keep us going for this year. So
yeah, exactly.
We'll be back with any Hughes news. I'm sure we'll be back on the mic, letting you all know.
Yeah, what's been going on. But until then, everyone, enjoy Unfrosted, a Pop Tart story, and we'll enjoy our lovely Pop Tarts. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Hi everybody, it's Synopsis Simon here. I've seen this film Unfrosted and I loved it. I mean, the reviews were pretty mixed, but I absolutely loved it, not least because I loved its 60s setting. I am a child of the 60s. I lived all my teenage years through the 60s, and this brought back a lot of memories. The first thing was, it's so colourful, and that's how I remember the 60s. The 50s was black and white, and it all turned to colour. 60s was also full of fantastic music, and there's a marvellous soundtrack that goes with this, choosing some of the very best music from those years. I loved Hugh Grant's performance, once again taking the mickey out of himself, but he's in good company. All sorts of very famous stars all turn up to take the mickey out of themselves. To me, this isn't so much a film as a cartoon, and all the characters are cartoon characters, but they're played by human beings. So if you think of it like that, you're going to really, really enjoy it.